Hi there, today we're talking about reading A Song of Ice and Fire and watching Game of Thrones from a woman's perspective. Because if you couldn't already tell, I am a woman. I hope that was obvious already, but just in case it's not, I am female. And A Song of Ice and Fire is one of my favourite book series ever created. I've built the majority of my booktube channel on A Song of Ice and Fire. We love talking about this epic, crazy, twisted series on this channel. However, I do feel like the general fan base tends to be majoritively male, which I'm not fussed about because if I'm being honest, everybody that I have spoken to on my YouTube channel about A Song of Ice and Fire has been so lovely. And I don't even know if you are male, female, in between. But my assumption is that the majority of George R.R. Martin's fan base does tend to be erring on the more male-dominated side. So I thought it would be interesting for me to film a video about reading A Song of Ice and Fire from a woman's perspective. And I am also currently watching the Game of Thrones TV show. I'm on season 3 at the moment, but I have read the whole book series, so I am going to be referring more to the books in this video, but the TV show is still very relevant. So let's take a deep dive into the female characters, the interesting way that George R.R. Martin writes them, and whether or not my experience of reading the book has been different because I am female, or does it not matter? Would I feel the same way about this series if I was a male? If I were a boy, I would probably still like A Song of Ice and Fire. So I hope that you enjoy this video. Make sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Just a disclaimer, I am going to keep this spoiler free because if you are somebody who hasn't read the A Song of Ice and Fire book series yet, then I hope that you find this video helpful and therefore I'm not going to spoil anything for you. It might just help aid your decision a little bit as to whether or not you're going to read it. I just want to start this off with saying I love this book series so much. It is genuinely one of my favourite pieces of written work ever, and George R.R. Martin is unbelievably talented, which is why I'm so angry that the series isn't finished. But I've already done a video about that, so we don't need to talk about that. I'm also going to leave timestamps in the description box in case there's a particular part that you'd like to skip ahead to. Feel free. I just want to start off by saying I am just one woman. I do not speak for all women. I have very different personalities to a lot of women, so therefore it's really not that deep. I really don't think that gender or sexual organs should come into whether or not you like a book series or can be part of the fan base. It ain't that deep, and I don't speak for all women. So at first, when I was reading A Song of Ice and Fire for the first time, I was like, yes, finally! Strong, complex female characters that are not just somebody's love interest or a sidekick or a lesser part of the story. Finally, it felt refreshing, if I'm being honest, because reading about women in fiction, it can be quite difficult because a lot of the time we're not the heroes of the story. We are the love interests, or we are the sidekicks, or we're not a main part of the storyline in a lot of works. But that's fine, you can still enjoy the works. So to come across a book series where that isn't the case, and George R.R. Martin has very strong male characters and strong female characters. He has weak male characters and weak female characters. I love the mix, I love the balance, and I'm here for it. It was refreshing to me. That is a statement that still holds true every time I think about A Song of Ice and Fire. However, it definitely does have its flaws. I'm not overlooking those. Whilst there are some incredible women characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, there are still some issues with how they are portrayed. But what I will say is that George R.R. Martin writes not only really well from the perspective of women, but from the perspective of lots of different women. Let's just compare the two characters of Cersei Lannister and Sansa Stark. Two completely different characters. Both female, very different personalities, very different morals and motives, and yet both of them are written so well. And this was a series written by a man. The fact that, to my knowledge, George R.R. Martin has never been a woman, but he can write really well from a woman's perspective. I admire that, but there are a few things that maybe haven't aged so well. So let's talk about what I feel like the female characters represent. Cersei Lannister, does she basically just represent psychopathy? And maybe revenge? Let's talk about her first, because she's such an interesting female character. She is the queen of manipulation, revenge, and let's just say that she does not need any man to work her way to the top. Honestly, she is a powerhouse, and whilst I don't agree with everything that she does, I cannot help but respect how she carves her way through a world that is stacked against her. In that day and age, women were not treated great. I don't think that that's a problem with George R.R. Martin's writing. I think that's just accurate. But let's be real, Cersei Lannister is a badass. Yes, she's a psychopath, but the confidence that she has, like her decisions are not great, but yet she stands by them. She makes very foolish, questionable decisions, but she's always confident in them. She really respects herself. I like that. But she is also incredibly deranged. Now with Cersei, there is a risk that she comes across as the crazy woman, your standard crazy gal who has mood swings and is completely psychotic. That is a very present stereotype in this day and age. And I feel like Cersei is just on the cusp of almost feeding into that stereotype. However, what saves her from this is the fact that her son Joffrey is the same. So the fact that Cersei is completely crazy, but so is Joffrey, means that she's not crazy because she's a woman. That's how I'm seeing it. She doesn't feed into that crazy woman stereotype and therefore do a disservice to women because her son's the same and he's a bloke. So what it means is you can be a psychopath either way. Your gender does not come into it. We can all be crazy. Smart move, Martin. Next, let's talk about one of my personal faves, Melisandre, who I think represents power and magic. She's one of the most unique female characters that I've ever read about. I love the way that she uses her femininity for her power. The fact that she is this loyal servant to the Lord of Light. And initially she's kind of introduced as like this seductive sorceress. But then she's also able to like manipulate those around them. Not just anybody, but a king, Stannis. The fact that she is able to wrap him around her finger and pose as his trusted advisor, I like the way that she does that. Now, I'm just going to be perfectly clear here, guys. I don't think that we should manipulate people. It ain't nice. But I love the way that Melisandre does it to Stannis. But I don't think that Melisandre is just there to show how she can manipulate people. She's also there to show her loyalty as a servant. She's completely committed to her faith and purpose. She stands by what she believes in. So although I do admire those parts about Melisandre and how they are represented through her character, there are some things that George R.R. Martin did with her character that I just don't think are necessary, and you wouldn't get this if it was a male character, I don't think. For example, Melisandre giving birth to a shadow demon baby. Why you gotta do that? There's other ways to show her crazy cool magic. Is it just because she's a woman that she had to give birth to a demon? Now, there are some people who believe that that was done to show like a nurturing or maternal quality to her magic, but I don't know. I'm not sure I buy that. I've read lots of stories with warlocks, magicians, wizards, and they don't give birth to demon shadow babies, but they're still really cool. Or am I just completely missing the point? And if Melisandre was a guy, I don't think she would have had to do that. I just think it was unnecessary. But I do like how the fact that Melisandre has a say in what Stannis does and the fact that he really trusts her opinion shows the kind of power that she holds, and again is a brilliant representation of women because she's worked her way to the top. She's advising a king. Not all people agree with her faith, yet she is still so strong in fulfilling her faith. Okay, so let's just talk about Sansa Stark, who I think represents character development, but I also feel like she's not a great representation of women because she was just really annoying. And reading Sansa's chapters as a woman, I just wanted to shake her and be like, come on, girl. She's your typical girl who has a crush on every hot guy, and she's a hopeless romantic. But on the other hand, the way that Sansa grows as a person, yes, it's a slow burn, it's over the course of the entire book series, but my goodness, is it strong when it happens. From the naive, almost obnoxious little girl that we meet at the start, to the woman who then understands power and how to use it. Again, I won't say too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but Sansa's journey is one of pain, manipulation, and learning how to play the game. And in the earlier books, she is somebody who is treated very badly, and she is constantly manipulated, spoken down to, but also she doesn't really have a backbone, and she doesn't really have all that much confidence. and she was just this hopeless romantic who viewed the world in an unrealistically optimistic way. Like, she always had hope that her Prince Charming was going to come. And to be honest, reading that from a woman's perspective, I did resonate with that, because when I was a young girl, that's probably the way that I saw the world. But here's where it starts to get a little bit messy for me, because with Sansa's character in particular, and a few others, it's almost like she's defined by her suffering. So almost like the only way that she is able to grow as a person is through suffering so much. Like, can we please stop defining female strength based on how much crap they have to go through before they end up breaking? Like, there's gotta be another way. Why are we using suffering as a metric? Like, how much can one person take? Like, the fact that someone is able to take so much suffering should not be the only way that we are viewing them as strong. And I feel like for a lot of females in fictional stories, not just George R.R. Martin's, but they do have to endure so much suffering in order for us to see their character progression. However, in a complete contrast to this, we have two characters who are female who start off very, very strong and are always very, very strong. Arya and Ygritte. Arya Stark is my personal favourite female character. She is the epitome of strength. She is also a badass, and she is also not defined by her gender at all. If Arya was a boy, her storyline would have been the same. That is what I like. I like where it genuinely does not matter if a character is a male or a female or anything in between. She's independent, she's strong-willed, she's determined. She doesn't play by anybody's rules. I think the only thing that's slightly disheartening about Arya's storyline is that for portions of the series, she does have to pose as a boy or pretend she's a boy because she's safer that way. Again, it's very realistic. That's not an issue with George R.R. Martin's writing or how he chooses to write his stories. I think that's just very realistic, and it's just a shame that that is the way it is for women. But other than that, I feel like Arya's storyline would have been the same if she was a male, and I love that. It shows how her being a female has a minimal role in what happens to her and what she chooses to do, and reading that from a woman's perspective was very refreshing. Very enlightening, and I loved it, and that's probably why she's my favourite character. And similarly, I mentioned Ygritte. She's another one who is pretty similar to Arya in the sense that she starts off strong and she just kind of always remains that way. Without spoiling anything, my only issue with Ygritte is that she kind of errs on the side of being a main character's love interest, and I feel like she serves a purpose of giving that main character a softer side or showing that he has a softer side, but I think that she does represent more than that, and I do admire her strength as well. And of course, then we have Daenerys Targaryen, who, let's be honest, is only cool because she has dragons. If it wasn't for the dragons, she'd be kind of bland and boring, in my opinion. Her storyline is a rollercoaster of emotions because I felt like I was constantly questioning her decisions. But honestly, I do love Daenerys. Like, she's a very complicated character, but I feel like an issue with her is that she's very driven by emotion. So a lot of the decisions that she makes are not really for political power, but more for how her emotions are. But I don't necessarily feel like that's because she's female. I feel like that's just because she's quite young. Like, she's a young girl trying to play at being queen. She's been thrust into this position of power and she doesn't really know how to use it. She does have trusted advisors around her who are trying to guide her through making political decisions. And I think that's where her downfall is that she doesn't really listen to them all the time. And she kind of just decides for herself what she wants to do when she's got no idea what she's doing. And again, without spoiling anything, there's a particular part of the series where she's thinking about marriage alliance because it's, you know, a political move. But then she's also struggling with her female urges and how as a young girl she does fancy boys. And that's where I became disinterested in her storyline, because I don't think it's that necessary. And again, Dany is defined by her suffering. She loses so much. She loses a lot of the people that are close to her. And I just don't always think that she makes the best decisions. The only male comparison to that I can think of is Tyrion, where there are decisions that he makes kind of like midway through the books where he is fueled with emotions, and that leads him to make some very bad decisions. I think if you've read the books, you'll hopefully know what I'm referring to. That's the only point in his storyline where his emotions are so strong that he makes these decisions. Whereas I feel like for Daenerys, it's consistent throughout. So I hope that she's not feeding into that stereotype of just being an emotional woman and not being able to make political decisions because she's so fueled with emotion. That's not really a great representation of women, I don't think. We can't talk about a woman's perspective of A Song of Ice and Fire without talking about Catelyn Stark, who, let's be honest, just portrays motherhood. She does have a sense of strength, but mainly it's a duty and loyalty to her family. She has this fierce, protective, maternal nature. Like, she's not driven by ambition or power, but mainly just for like this fierce love that she has for her family. But unfortunately, I do feel like Catelyn's maternal instincts run so deep that it overrides her logical thinking at times. And as a woman myself, I found that a little bit frustrating to read. And her character arc is often shaped by grief and loss. And I feel like much of her identity is wrapped up in motherhood. But interestingly, it was a bit odd because as a woman, I found her both fascinating and frustrating to read from because I do admire her maternal instincts. There isn't another character who is female or male who has those instincts. The only other thing that I can compare it to is possibly Cersei trying to protect Joffrey and the love that she has for her children, and also maybe Davos Seaworth and how he feels about his sons, and being a father is part of his identity. However, I feel like Catelyn's is on another level. I think being a mother first and foremost for her does give her an additional strength. And although I can't massively relate to a lot of Catelyn's experiences, or any, I do get that it is very realistic for a lot of women to have that maternal love for their family, of course. And I feel like her family and her children just define her. Okay, now I cannot leave out one of the most fascinating female characters and the epitome of empowerment for me, Brienne of Tarth. Another one of my favourite female characters and another example of how being a female does not define anything, and I loved it. Brienne of Tarth is a bit of a revelation when it comes to how female characters are portrayed in fiction. She does not fit the mould of what is normally expected from female characters, especially in Westeros. She displays the morals and the values of a true knight, yet she is a woman. She's not a beautiful, delicate lady, but does that even matter? People make fun of her for it. It's not very nice. She's insulted and belittled because of it. But does it even matter? She is a knight. She has values and morals that she lives to consistently, day in, day out. She's a warrior. Plain and simple. What I love about Brienne's character is that people are constantly trying to shove her into a box in terms of what a woman should be. You know, beautiful, fair lady. But Brienne's like, nope, not for me. Like, she knows who she is. She wants to be who she is. And that's what she holds true throughout her entire storyline. And I love that because it goes against the standards and the stereotypes that people place on women. And she's literally just like, no, that's not me. I don't want that to be me, so it's not going to be me. She becomes a knight not because she's trying to prove herself to anybody, but because she's passionate and has a sense of duty. And she has honour. Traits that we don't always see celebrated in women. She's strong, she can fight, she's skilled. So why can't she be a knight? And that was why I loved reading A Song of Ice and Fire from a woman's perspective, because I don't know, obviously let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't know if as a man you are going to feel the same way when reading about Brienne. I don't know if you're going to feel the same empowerment that I did. But don't get me wrong, there will definitely be male characters that you resonated with if you are a man and that made you feel empowered. You will definitely have a male character that I can't understand because I was not brought up as a male that makes you feel the way that Brienne makes me feel. I can almost guarantee that that will be the case. But I think what Brienne shows is that, like, you can literally just ignore any comments that are made to you and just do whatever it is that you want to do and whoever you want to be. I just loved it. So I talked about how it felt reading through the female characters from a woman's perspective, but I also just want to have a brief chat around the ways that women are described or depicted in this series, but in particular their bodies. So within the world of Westeros, it is a very brutal place, and in particular women's bodies are unfortunately subjected to that brutality, to say the least. Trigger warning here, please feel free to skip ahead a couple of minutes or so. But from childbirth to SA and the constant trauma that women endure in Westeros, a lot of it felt very unnecessary for the amount of detail that George R.R. Martin has gone into. We're very much so aware that those things happened in that day and age and that still continue to happen in this day and age. But I don't need the regularity of it written about consistently in every single book that he publishes. And it's like their bodies are battlegrounds in a way that we rarely see in men. But it's not just about the pain and suffering that these women endure. In this series as well, women are often defined by their ability to produce heirs, give birth, their reproductive roles. So for example, Cersei, for all of her political scheming, is constantly referred back to in terms of her ability to produce heirs and her children, to make the future king. There's also that narrative around Daenerys' ability to produce children and how even her dragons are viewed as her children. She is mother of dragons. So she's forced to take upon this role as a mother, whereas if she was a man, they would probably just be their companions rather than their children. Even Sansa's own fertility becomes a part of her manipulation in her journey, and how as soon as she started her blood, that was a very prominent part in her storyline and also evoked a lot of fear in her because of how her body can now be used. Some very difficult stuff to read about, stuff that women can resonate with, and really hard to read about the ways that women's reproductive functions can be used by men in a way that's not nice. So that's something that I didn't always love about the books, although it was very realistic for that time period. But what I also like about Song of Ice and Fire is that it's not just women who experience the hardship and the brutality and the cruelty. In A Song of Ice and Fire, everybody does. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, a dire wolf. Everybody does. And that's why I think that it's so important that George R.R. Martin has created a range of different characters, both male and female, who have lots of different authorities, lots of different political standpoints, lots of different faiths, and lots of different personalities and strengths. I mean, how have I not even mentioned Marjorie Tyrell? She's another one of my absolute favourite female characters. She is probably the one who uses her femininity the most to gain power. She actually uses her womanhood to her advantage, shows how a woman can embrace being a woman to give her authority. She's aware that she has different skills to men, but she uses them in her most advantageous way. So I've waffled on for a while, so let's conclude with, overall, to sum it all up, what was my experience of reading A Song of Ice and Fire from a woman's perspective? So like I've mentioned, this book series does have its flaws and issues in how women are portrayed, from the ways that their bodies and experiences are described, to the roles that they're expected to fulfill, whether that's mothers, lovers, victims. There's a lot of it that can feel outdated and uncomfortable at times, especially being a woman who has this body that works this particular way and seeing male characters taking advantage of another woman character's ability to do those things. That's hard to read. But here's the thing, despite all of that, George R.R. Martin gives us female characters that are intelligent, strong, complex, complicated, psychopathic, multifaceted, and unapologetically themselves. And I think that there's more of those characters than there isn't. But what I love the most is that he also does that for male characters. Every single character has such depth, other than Bran. He's a bit boring. I think what I like the most about Song of Ice and Fire is that it doesn't just give us one type of strong female character. There's room for all types of women to exist in that world. Even if they don't always fit into an expectation or a box or a stereotype, they all feel so different. And that's what makes it such an engaging and enjoyable read. For somebody like me who is looking for a more nuanced way that women are written in fantasy fiction, representation of women in fantasy, it's not always great, I'm not gonna lie. It's not always brilliant, but I did actually enjoy it in A Song of Ice and Fire despite the flaws. And to me that's what matters, because you could take their biological sex out of the equation and just look at their personalities, their values, their morals, what they're fighting for. And that to me is what matters the most. So I am glad that I read it from a woman's perspective. I don't know why it is a male-dominated fan base. And this is coming from someone who identifies as female, fits into a lot of the female stereotypes. If I'm being honest, I'm a very basic white girl, I'm not gonna lie. And I loved A Song of Ice and Fire. I love how realistic it feels, which is not always comfortable. But most of all, I love the range of female characters that I can resonate with. There were parts of Arya that I resonated with and wanted to learn from. There are parts of Sansa that I identify from my own childhood. There are parts of Daenerys that I aspire to be more like, but there's also some foolish qualities in Daenerys that I resonate with. And Brienne is just somebody I look up to be honest. So basically the female characters in A Song of Ice and Fire are inspiring. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on reading A Song of Ice and Fire from your perspective. I would love to know if you agree with any of these areas, if you disagree. Let's have a good old chat about it in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And if you like my content and you want to see more from me, then please subscribe because it's free and it means that you'll see my videos easier. I also just want to give a huge shout out to the Dragon Riders who are supporting my channel. Thank you so much, it means the world to me. You are so appreciated. If you'd like to have your name featured in my videos like this one, then please consider becoming a Dragon Rider. Or if you'd like to support the channel in any way, then please check out the channel memberships. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about this topic. If there's anything else that you'd like me to chat about and start a conversation about on my channel, please do let me know. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.